Love needs understanding, not control. Support goes both ways.
I used to believe that love meant never saying no. When I married her, I promised myself that I would be present, not just as a husband, but as her shadow. Wherever she went, I would go. Whatever she needed, I would give. At that time, it felt noble. It felt right. She loved my presence. She needed it everywhere. Come with me, she would say, to family gatherings, to hospital visits, to errands that could have taken minutes but somehow stretched into hours. If she felt anxious, I was there. If she felt bored, I filled the silence. If she felt lonely, I canceled my plans. And I did it happily. Because when you love someone deeply, you don't count the cost, you count the moments. At least, that's what I believed. My job came second. Not because I didn't care, but because love felt more urgent. I worked hard. My job wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills. It was built on time, trust, and consistency. Clients expected me to show up. Deadlines didn't wait. Money didn't appear just because intentions were good. Still, every time my phone buzzed, "Can you come now? I don't want to go alone. It won't take long." And every time, I told myself, work can wait. Love can't. At first, missing a shift felt harmless. Then I missed another. Then another. Clients stopped calling as often. My supervisor's tone changed, polite but distant. My income began to shrink, quietly, without drama. I didn't tell her. Not because she wouldn't listen, but because I didn't want to sound selfish. I didn't want love to feel like a negotiation. Inside, pressure was building. Bills didn't stop. Responsibilities didn't disappear. But at home, all she saw was my availability. She wanted me everywhere. She never asked about my job. When I came home exhausted, she thought I was quiet. When I worried about money, she thought I was distracted. When I stayed silent, she thought everything was fine. And maybe that was my mistake. I didn't blame her, not then. I only wished she would notice. Notice that love also means understanding where money comes from. Notice that earning is not absence, it's responsibility. Notice that standing beside someone also means letting them stand alone sometimes. But love, when unbalanced, becomes pressure, and I was carrying it alone. That was the beginning, not of divorce, but of silence.
The first warning didn't come loudly. It came quietly, in the form of a missed call. I was sitting beside her in a hospital waiting area, holding her bag while she scrolled through her phone. She wasn't sick. She just didn't want to go alone. I told myself it was fine. I told myself work could wait. My phone vibrated again. And again. I didn't answer. That evening, I checked my messages. One client had canceled. Another asked if I was still reliable. I typed long replies, apologizing, explaining delays without telling the truth. I didn't say why I was absent. I only said I would do better. I believed that. But the pattern had already started. I began arriving late, leaving early, asking for favors. Each time she needed me somewhere, my mind argued with itself. Just this once. She needs you. Work will understand. But work doesn't understand emotions. It understands results. My income started shrinking, slowly, almost politely. Fewer assignments. Shorter hours. The numbers on my screen changed, but I didn't let them change my face. At home, I stayed calm, supportive, present. She never asked, "How was work today?" She asked, "Are you free tomorrow?" And I always said yes. Inside me, stress was building like water behind a cracked wall. I started waking up earlier, sleeping later. Not because I was busy, but because my thoughts wouldn't stop. Bills arrived on time. Pressure arrived early. Silence stayed constant. Once, I tried to explain. Not fully, just a hint. "I might need to focus more on work these days," I said casually. She frowned, confused. "But you're always with me. Isn't that enough?" I smiled. I nodded. That's when I realized something painful. She measured love by presence. I measured love by responsibility. And neither of us was wrong, but we were no longer aligned. At work, my supervisor finally called me in. His voice was calm, professional, disappointed. "You've changed," he said. "You used to be dependable." That word stayed with me. Dependable. I was dependable to everyone, except myself. That night, I sat alone in the dark after she fell asleep. The room felt heavier than usual. I stared at my hands and wondered when love had quietly turned into pressure. Not anger, not hate, just pressure. And I knew, if this continued, something would break. I just didn't know yet whether it would be my job, my marriage, or me.
I didn't quit my job. I didn't resign. I didn't walk away. I just slowly vanished. At first, it was small things. A meeting I joined late. An email I replied to hours after it mattered. I told myself I was still there, just stretched thin. But people notice absence even when you pretend it's temporary. My name stopped coming up in conversations. Projects moved forward without me. Decisions were made in rooms I was no longer invited into. One afternoon, I stood outside the office building longer than usual. I watched people walk in with purpose, coffee in hand, talking about deadlines and plans. I used to be one of them. Now, I felt like a visitor to a life I once owned. Inside, my desk looked the same, but it didn't feel the same. My screen filled with tasks I was behind on. Deadlines blinked like quiet warnings. No alarms. No shouting. Just numbers slipping away. At home, everything looked fine. She laughed. She planned trips. She told stories about people and places she wanted us to visit next. I listened. I nodded. I smiled when required. But I stopped sharing my side of the day. Not because she told me to stop, but because she didn't ask. Once, she noticed I was unusually quiet. "You're tired," she said. "I'll make tea." She meant care. I know that. But care without curiosity feels incomplete. Late at night, I opened my bank app more often than my messages. The balance dropped in slow, humiliating steps. Not enough to cause panic, just enough to cause fear. The kind that sits in your chest and tightens when the room goes quiet. I started calculating everything. If I missed one more client, if this month ended like the last, if next year looked the same, my future felt blurry, like a road disappearing into fog. One evening, I came home early, not because I was done, but because there was nothing left for me to do there. I sat alone in the living room, lights off, listening to the hum of the refrigerator. That's when it hit me. I wasn't failing because I was weak. I was failing because I was absent. Love had taken my time. Silence had taken my voice. And avoidance had taken my career. I didn't hate her. I didn't blame her. But for the first time, I admitted something quietly, honestly, painfully. I was disappearing from my own life. And if I didn't stop it, there would be nothing left to save.
I didn't wake up one day wanting distance. Distance grew inside me quietly, the way cracks form in walls, unnoticed until the structure starts failing. That morning, she handed me a list. Hospital visit, a cousin's engagement, a short trip she wanted to take just to feel better. She smiled while listing them, like these were small favors. Like my hesitation would be unreasonable. I looked at the clock. I looked at my phone. I looked at the weight of another workday slipping away. "I have deadlines," I said carefully. "I'll try." She frowned, not in anger, but in disappointment. That hurt more than shouting ever could. "You're always trying," she replied, "but you're never really there." The words stayed with me long after she left the room. I asked myself something I had avoided for months. When did being present become the same as being available on demand? Love used to feel mutual. Now it felt scheduled, like my role was to show up, stay quiet, and sacrifice without question. At work, my manager called me in. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't accuse. He just said, "You're capable, but unreliable lately." That word hit harder than insult. Unreliable. I walked home slower than usual, replaying everything in my head. Every canceled meeting. Every missed call. Every time I said yes when I should have said wait. At home, she talked about the trip again. I interrupted, gently. "I can't go." The silence that followed was thick and sharp. "You don't care anymore," she said. I wanted to say everything. I wanted to explain pressure, fear, responsibility, survival. But I realized something terrifying. I had been explaining for months. She had been listening, without understanding. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, her breathing steady beside me. I loved her. That part was still true. But love wasn't supposed to erase me. For the first time, I didn't ask how to make her happy. I asked how much of myself I could lose before nothing remained. And the answer scared me, because love without balance had turned into quiet control, and silence had become my agreement. That was the night I understood. If I didn't choose myself soon, there would be no me left to choose.
Something changed after that night. Not suddenly, not dramatically. I still woke up on time. Still ate meals with her. Still answered when she spoke. But I stopped explaining. No more long reasons. No more emotional justifications. No more trying to translate my exhaustion into words she could accept. When she asked, "Why are you late?" I answered, "The work." When she said, "You've changed," I replied, "Maybe." Silence became my language, not because I didn't care, but because caring had started costing too much. She noticed. She tried softer tones, then sharper ones. Concern turned into accusation. "You're choosing your job over me," she said one evening. I wanted to laugh at the simplicity of it. I wanted to scream at how wrong it was. But instead, I just looked at her. For the first time, I didn't rush to defend myself. I realized something painful. Explaining only works when the other person wants to understand. At work, things stabilized. I stayed late. I showed up early. I reclaimed responsibility, like a man picking up pieces of himself scattered over months. With every task completed, something inside me straightened. Not happiness, not peace, dignity. At home, the distance widened. She'd speak. I'd listen. She'd complain. I'd nod. Inside, I was no longer negotiating my worth. One night, she asked quietly, "Are you angry with me?" I thought carefully before answering. "No," I said. "I'm just tired of explaining why I deserve space." Her face changed, confusion, then fear. She had never seen me like this. Calm, detached, unmovable. That scared her. For me, it felt like standing on solid ground after months of sinking. I understood then. When a man stops begging to be understood, he starts being respected or resisted. Love didn't vanish. It hardened. I still cared, but I no longer folded. That night, I sat alone on the balcony, city lights flickering below. The air was cold, and for the first time in a long while, my chest felt lighter, not because life was easier, but because I had stopped carrying everything alone. She didn't understand my silence at first. She thought it was mood, then pride, then punishment. But silence, when it comes from exhaustion, doesn't beg to be noticed. It waits to be understood. One evening, she followed me into the room and closed the door behind her. "Say something," she said. Her voice wasn't sharp anymore. It trembled. I sat on the edge of the bed, still wearing my work clothes. The day had drained me. Meetings, deadlines, numbers that decided whether we ate comfortably or barely survived. "What do you want me to say?" I asked. That question hit her harder than any argument. She spoke fast then, words tumbling over each other. She said she felt lonely. She said she missed the man who used to follow her everywhere. She said she never meant to hurt my work. I listened, fully, quietly, and for the first time I answered honestly, without anger, without softness. "I didn't stop loving you," I said. "I stopped disappearing for you." Her eyes filled. She realized something in that moment. Not because I raised my voice, but because I didn't. I told her about the missed opportunities, the clients I lost, the warnings from my boss, the nights I lay awake calculating bills instead of dreaming. She covered her mouth. "I didn't know it was that bad," she whispered. I nodded. "That's the problem," I replied. "You never asked. You only demanded presence, not understanding." The room felt smaller. For the first time, the balance of power shifted, not toward control, but truth. She reached for my hand. I didn't pull away, but I didn't hold on either. That hesitation said everything. Love doesn't die in explosions. It fades in moments where one person finally sees the damage they ignored and realizes they arrived too late. That night, we slept on opposite sides of the bed. No fight, no tears, just the quiet acceptance that something precious had been stretched past repair. I stared at the ceiling, feeling strangely calm. Because once the truth is spoken clearly, you can't unhear it, and you can't unknow who you've become. The decision didn't come suddenly. There was no suitcase packed in anger, no slammed doors, no final argument to justify leaving. It came quietly, like understanding finally catching up with pain. A few days after our last conversation, I woke up earlier than usual. The house was still. No requests. No expectations waiting for me. I sat at the table, with a cup of tea growing cold in my hands, and realized something important. I felt lighter, not happier, not relieved, just lighter. That's when I knew the truth. Love should not feel like constant obligation. Marriage should not cost you your purpose to prove your presence. When she woke up, she noticed the difference in me. "You've changed," she said carefully. "I've stopped fighting myself," I replied. She tried to negotiate then, not with demands, but promises. She said she would adjust. She said she would understand my work now. I believed her. But belief wasn't enough anymore. Because understanding that comes after damage is not healing. It's regret. I told her I wasn't leaving because I hated her. I was leaving because I had finally learned how to love myself without guilt. She cried softly. I didn't stop her, and she didn't stop me. We signed the papers weeks later. No lawyers arguing, no accusations, just two people accepting that love without balance turns into control, even when intentions are good. On my last day in that house, I walked through every room slowly. The walls still carried memories, but memories are not chains unless you hold on to them. Outside, the air felt different. The city noise sounded honest again. I went back to work fully, rebuilt trust with my clients, earned not just money, but dignity. Sometimes I still think of her, not with anger, not with longing, but with clarity, because some people come into your life to teach you love, and others come to teach you limits, and that lesson saved my life.